these autonomous drones, we've just seen how successful they've been in Ukraine and in Russia. Now, who would have thought that the Ukrainians could have the ability to have an impact deep inside Russia and a strategic impact, taking out strategic project. And of course, if you use drones, then there's not manpower involved. If one could quite see if a few American jets were shot down, then people in the US would start really questioning what Trump's doing. If a few drones get shot down, nobody's really too concerned about that. But I think it's part of any really effective military capability. You generally don't want to rely on one thing. You want to have a number. You want to have redundancies, we call it. So you've got drones, you've got fighter jets, you've got missiles, you've got a whole panoply. And I expect these drones are also probably a lot more effective about getting through some of the air defense that the Iranians might have. Although we have seen from the attacks last year that the Iranian air defense, which is based on Russian air defense, slightly older versions, the S-300s, is not very effective against US jets anyway, but the drones, again, are part of it. But and also it's a signal of intention. I mean, you cannot help but think Trump has gone all in here. They have put everything on show. Trump is really barking. He is the biggest dog in this fight. And by having everything in the shop window, there can be no doubt in Tehran that if they don't comply, they're in for a whole lot of hurt. And it's a question of whether the Ayatollah is, as concerned about the rest of Iran than he is about himself. So, I think it's all part of the whole build-up. No mistakes. We are the biggest dog here. Either comply or we're going to go all in. First of all, we got the biggest US build-up, predominantly of air power in the Middle East since probably the first Gulf War, or people quoting the second Gulf War. So incredible firepower. The sort of firepower that the rest of NATO, for instance, could probably not put together. So that is all arrayed in position. And I think when you look at it from a military perspective, this sort of capability can't stay on station, as it were, forever. So Trump has either got to use it or he's got to think about sort of moving it away. So I think against that backdrop is where discussions are taking place. Now, it's not the only thing happening at the moment, of course. Trump is heavily focused in Cuba and back the other side of the pond on a whole host of issues. And of course, not least, we also have the Ukrainian war going on, which Trump is slightly distancing himself. And then we have the Israelis, and Trump, seems to be very much beholden. The whole Iran piece is around Israel, and of course, it was Israel who, with the US, attacked the nuclear program last year, which is still the thing causing angst. Now, it is pretty clear the Iranians are trying to draw this out because they know that the US fleet can't stay on station all of this time. And I suppose it's a bit of a dilemma. Does Trump have the subtleties and the negotiation skills almost not to use the fleet? And I think, again, the Iranians seem to be being quite clever, sort of drip feeding bits and pieces. There are some media channels reporting today that the Iranians have said that they've given a commitment not to make a nuclear weapon. And that's unconfirmed. But in effect, if that was the case, then job done as far as, what Trump's been talking about. But interesting, I know the Secretary of State Rubio has been saying today that actually the real concern now is the ballistic missile program, and Iran is only building ballistic missiles to attack the US. So now it's what we call mission creep, which is always the most dangerous thing. And we've seen so much mission creep in the Middle East, really, over the years. I mean, it's 35 years ago today that I was a young tank commander in the first Gulf War, and we were just kicking the Iraqis out of Kuwait. I mean, the irony, certainly as far as Ukraine goes, should not be lost. So it's basically we are probably where we were 2 or 3 weeks ago, and things are finely balanced. It is whether, in my mind, whether Trump has the patience to keep going, whether the Iranians think that they are achieving their aims by drawing this out, and we shall see. So, yeah, there is a long way from a resolution at the moment. The original reason for the US and the Israelis to attack Iran last year was the nuclear weapons program. And the reason that the US fleet is now anchored virtually off Iran is the nuclear weapons program. So, if it is true that Iran has said it's not going to make a bomb, I suppose that's one thing. It's whether you believe the Iranians. Now, the Iranians have been saying for many years they're not making a bomb, when quite clearly they have been trying to make one, and they have been enriching uranium. Now, sure, they have a nuclear program for a lot of nuclear power stations providing their heat and electricity. But the significant thing here is you only need to enrich uranium to provide the sort of fuel to generate that electricity and power to a maximum of about 10, 15, 20%. Whereas for a weapon, you need to enrich it to about 90, 95%. And it's clear that the Iranians have been going well over the 20% that would be for just for power stations. So again, it's whether the Americans, whether Trump in particular, believes what the Iranians are actually saying. So I suppose success would be a complete stop to the Iranian weapons program. But it's pretty clear, there are a number of things happening in Iran at the moment. This is an autocratic regime. The Ayatollah rules, the supreme leader rules, although in theory they have a democratically elected parliament and a democratically elected president. That might be the case, but the supreme leader tells them what to do. There's no democracy there at all. There's a lot of unrest in Iran. We understand thousands of people who protested in January were shot by the sort of state police, as it were, and there seems to be a lot of protests going on at universities at the moment. So I suppose within Iran there's quite a lot of disquiet. But for 40 years or so, the clerics have been running the place with an iron fist, as it were, iron rod, and trying to unpick that is going to be, incredibly difficult. Now, some people are suggesting that the Americans would like regime change, and they believe that would be the way to make Iran less of a threat, because, with the Ayatollah in command, his main aim has always been to get nuclear weapons so that they could flex those particular muscles. Now, it's clear that they are well short of that. It's clear that the Americans, sort of buoyed up by the Israelis, are considering very seriously of attacking Iran, and probably not just attacking their nuclear program, but probably trying to whittle down, the Revolutionary Guard, the sort of the military, as it were, and everything else associated with it. So, it's whether the Trump will accept success of stopping Iran getting a nuclear weapon anytime soon, whether that's enough. But we now see the ballistic missile issue coming in, and one again, it's so many smoke and mirrors here. A ballistic missile without a nuclear warhead is, there's not much to it. You could only strap a certain amount of conventional explosives to an intercontinental ballistic missile. And by the way, the Americans are developing a shield that will probably shoot those Iranian missiles down. So again, you're sort of knowing that, you're going, what are the Americans worried about? Let's settle for the fact that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon, and then we can take the sting out of the Middle East, turn the fires off, as it were. But we're in very strange times at the moment, and Trump is a very strange president. And with everything else happening around the planet at the moment, it's very difficult to call exactly what will happen. But let's hope, if the Americans agree that Iran is not nuclear capable, then hopefully that might take some of the sting out of this situation.